Good evening. I apologize for the delay. Can you see or hear me now? Somebody just wave or something at the in the chat. I apologize for the delay. This has been okay. Hang on here. Okay, so you can see or hear. Okay. Apologize for the delay. I was working on things and something I had one or two video cables go bad at the same time, or my docking station overheated. So let's get right into it, because I've got a bunch of things I want to talk about, and I'm going to talk a lot about more on Sunday. But the first thing I want to talk about is, let me share my screen here. Here we go. Okay. Just an update for you. I'm going to be speaking at a couple of conferences coming up. I've mentioned this one before. This is LDBCA. That's LDBC.ca. That stands for Last Days Bible Conference. And that'll be May 6th, 5th and 6th in Calgary, Canada. Pamela and I are also going to be doing some traveling at that time. So we'll be around the West. And so if you want to, I'm going to be out in Montana, Oregon, Idaho, maybe Washington, Oregon, and then coming back across Wyoming. If you're interested, contact me and I'll see if we can set something up. So that's Last Days Bible Conference. I have 4 talks I'm going to do. I'm going to do Behold, He Came, prophecies about the first coming of Messiah. And I'm going to focus on sort of prophecy archaeology and geography. Then the second talk will be Behold, He Comes. It'll be about the prophecies about the second coming of Messiah. And then the next one will be Behold, He Reigns. We'll be talking about the millennial kingdom. And then we're going to do a talk about the where. The city of God. We're going to talk about Jerusalem in the 4th talk. So that'll be May 5th and 6th. And then also we'll be doing a conference, Moriel.org, June 16 to 18, I believe it is, Thursday through Sunday in Scotland. You can go to Moriel.org and get information about that and registration. That's what we know is a residential conference. There's a conference center and you can come and stay there. I will also be speaking at a church down in, I believe, around Yorkshire in northern England the weekend before, maybe Saturday and Sunday both. So that's a small church, and I'll post something about that. So if you're interested in that, you'll be able to, I'll give you some notice about that. So, first of all, the first question I'm going to answer to my Weisenheimer friend there, Mr. Hart, is no, I'm fine. I'm doing this on Wednesday just because I have a lot of other things to do the rest of the week. By the way, on Sunday, if you want to watch the update live, it'll be streaming at 8 a.m. Sunday, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, U.S., and then it'll be up. It will replay it at 11 o'clock probably, and then it'll be available. But anyway, it'll be there. So let's talk about some of the stuff that's going on this week. The biggest thing is that we have the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. There's also been 2 other banks collapse, Signature Bank and another one that begins with S. They have all failed this week. But, and so the question is there a lot of contagion in the system? So I'm going to be very honest with you. I do not know. My opinion, though, is that it is serious. It's not good news. We know that at some point the system is going to be, I don't see how there's not some sort of collapse. So right now, so just what happened with Silicon Valley Bank. So Silicon Valley Bank was a very woke, tech-oriented institution. A lot of startup money came into Silicon Valley Bank and their branches around the world. For example, a lot of the Israeli tech startup money that had been raised, I don't know how much, but a lot of it was in Silicon Valley Bank. And as you know, with the political situation in Israel and the controversy over judicial reform, that's actually passed first reading in the legislature in the Knesset today or yesterday. There's a lot of controversy about that. And a lot of people are making big economic threats against the nation of Israel. The tech companies are saying they're going to withdraw. We're going to get out of Israel. We're leaving. We're out of here if this judicial reform goes through. It's interesting, as they made that threat, then their bank, their main bank, went down. It's the second largest bank failure in U.S. history. It's about the 16th largest bank. And the concern is whether there is a contagion that's going through the system. I will just say from my perspective, it's not good. So what happened to Silicon Valley Bank is because the interest rates have been kept artificially low for so long in the United States, it's just resulted in money being pumped into the system. Then Charlie Vector happened, and even more money was pumped into the system. And when you have that much money in the system, you're going to get inflation. It's going to devalue the dollar. There's a whole host of things that could happen, and we're seeing inflation right now. So what the banks did was, so let's say the bank has $100 million. Usually, because of capital liquidity, working capital requirements, the bank has to keep so out of $100 million, they have to keep 6 to 8% in working capital, so that if people come and want their money at the bank, they need to have some money so they can withdraw. And the rest of the money they can loan out and they can invest it. I think what Silicon Valley Bank did was they bought a lot of long-term into the future treasury bonds at like very low percentage rate. But what happened was when the Fed started raising interest rates, the value of those bonds went down significantly, like maybe 30%. And when then people started demanding their money, they didn't have it. So the bank has stepped in. And there's a big argument out there about, was this a bailout or not a bailout? Listen, the FDIC came in and said they were going to make good on all the deposits. I don't think it's good because even left-wing guys, like here's one, I think. Yeah, I won't bother pulling it up. In the New York Times, Paul Krugman, who I think is an absolute lunatic, but he's won a Nobel Peace Prize and I haven't, or some kind of economic prize. Even he thinks that this is bad because it's going to cause the bank to do. It's going to cause all banks to be a little bit sloppy if they know the government's going to bail them out. So we can argue about whether the technical term bailout applies or not, but clear the government stepped in and said they would make good on all of this. But that's causing a lot of concern in banking systems in Israel, France, the UK, and I don't know I just don't know how well this can be contained. I'm going to make a recommendation. I caught it the other day. He seems like a younger guy, but everybody seems younger to me these days. Britt Gillette has a YouTube channel, and he did a couple pretty good talks on it that he explained it, and he's pretty good on finance and he explains it well. So rather than me reiterating, but the concern that Britt expressed there was that at some point the system collapses. And so what you want to be then is you want to be in something that you have physical possession of. That could be real estate, that could be gold, that could be oil. But if you have something, it's a contract for a deliverable, you're not getting delivered. So if you don't have physical gold, and I think I've even read some things where people are trying to go out and get silver and they can't get silver right now. So the best thing I can say is it's best to spread your money around. The problem with the Silicon Valley Bank was a lot of these tech companies, I don't know what they were thinking. The FDIC only insures deposits up to $250,000. So you should spread it around. And there's also, I've seen some banks do some rather clever cash management systems where they have the money distributed out through a whole bunch of accounts under $250,000, and then the money will be swept from those accounts up into a payable account. But banks they do things on their own. I mean, and I represent banks. I've represented banks in my legal career for many, many decades. And even I have trouble. For example, Pam and I, we paid something to somebody last week, and we wrote them a check for $4,000. When our bank, Huntington Bank, keyed that in, they keyed in $9,000. So when Pam was paying bills and everything, she looked and it's like, hey, wait a minute, we should have $5,000 more. So she called the bank, and the bank said, oh, yes, we keyed it wrong. We made a mistake, and you'll be able. So we wrote the check, and the next day, $9,000 instead of $4,000 is taken out of our account. But then when we called the bank, they said, yeah, we'll reverse it, but it's going to take 5 business days. So we still don't have our $5,000 back. And I will be writing a letter of complaint to the FDIC as if they don't have anything else to do other than to respond to my letter. But banks operate that way. That's just, I could tell you a few stories of some personal things, but that's neither here nor there. But the system is really on a knife's edge. That's what you need to know. And I don't know which way it goes. So I think if you go out now and somebody says, we're going to deliver gold to you in the future, physical gold, I don't know that I would believe them. I think you're going to not get it. Ultimately, I think where this goes is that the system pretty much collapses, and then that's when they will step in and roll out central bank digital currencies. I don't think it'll be one central bank digital currency. I think it will be a basket of central bank digital currencies. But the system is in very much stress at the moment. I'll try to find the link to it. Maybe while I'm talking here, I can actually look for it. But I did see, it was either in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, had a pretty good timeline on Silicon Valley Bank. Actually here, I'm trying to find it. They have a graphic. Well, I can at least get you to the article here. So here's the article that has there's. So this is pretty good timeline about what happened with Silicon Valley Bank. And the New York Times is doing a pretty good job reporting on it. The Washington Post is doing a pretty good job of reporting on it. Wall Street Journal, Financial Times. Let's just understand that everything is very uncertain right now. And eventually, I think that they're going to, the system is under great stress. How quickly things change, I don't know. Let me give you an example, though. I think that this is just me speculating from a Bible prophecy standpoint. What's going to happen is that the value of physical commodities is going to go up. So certain countries that hold a lot of physical commodities that everybody wants and needs, like oil, is going to go up. And so when I'm looking at things in the Middle East, we see Saudi Arabia, we see Iraq, we see Iran, and they have a lot of oil deposits. Russia has a lot of natural gas and oil. And I think what will happen is that their influence will increase. There is also a lot of concern that the U.S. dollar will no longer be the central bank or the reserve currency of the world, which gives us in America a lot of benefits. Russia, the BRICS companies, that would be Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and then there's a bunch of countries joining them. I believe I read that Mexico was joining in with the BRICS today. I know that they've talked about bringing in Turkey and Iran. Even though Turkey and Iran have terrible economies right now, I also saw that today in Lebanon, the value of the Lebanon currency, which is called a lira, it fell to its lowest value relative to the dollar ever. So it's just it's a real mess. I don't know what's going to happen. I was talking to somebody the other day that I had to talk to customer service for a company, which is kind of, I always put customer service in scare quotes these days. And we were talking about what has happened in this. So this is my next concern about the banking system. So everything is on a knife's edge. A lot of banks have invested in these bonds that are now dropping in value. There's also something else that I have not seen anybody else talk about, but this has been my concern for 3 years now. Back when the lockdowns and everything started on Charlie Vector, I was involved in some groups and we had some meetings to talk about, okay, what's going to happen with the demand destruction that we're seeing in commercial real estate. Drive around. If you live in a city, drive around. Look at the parking lots of these office buildings that used to be full during the week, and now you see virtually no cars there. What we were seeing back in 2020 was that people who were leasing commercial real estate were going to their landlords and saying, everybody's working from home, everybody likes it, and so we don't need as much real estate, as much office space. So let's say we have 10,000 square feet now. We will pay you a reduced rate. We'll never pay you another dime in rent. We'll bankrupt the company that owes you money. We'll set up another company. We'll come to you. We'll take 1,500 square feet. And we'll do it at a reduced rate because we really just need some space for our back office operations, billing and collections and that type of thing, and our technical people. Otherwise, we don't need that space. And drive around all of these office buildings. I see them all over Columbus. Now, Columbus is kind of weird because we have these big tech companies building and doing things we have these massive Facebook Meta server farms, Google server farms, Amazon server farms, warehouses and that type of thing. And then they're building the largest chip plant in the world, about 15 or 20 minutes from my house. And so it's kind of pumping up the real estate market in some cases. I've seen it's almost like California appreciation in some cases with people that are involved in that. But and Columbus is kind of in a central hub of the internet connections and that sort of thing. So we're a little bit protected here. But you drive around other parts of town and buildings that used to be full. I mean, you'll drive by, they would have 200, 300 cars in the parking lot, and you drive around in the middle of the day now and there's like 20, 30, maybe 50. large law firms in the building that I used to be with downtown Columbus, right across from the State House. There were law firms that used to have 2.5 floors. Now they have half a floor. So, but what's happened is so we had these meetings early on in the Charlie Vector thing, and like, what are we going to do? How are we going to handle our clients and service our clients when they start to have to foreclose on the people that they make commercial loans to? And guess what happened? I've had one foreclosure in 3 years. What the banks have done is they've been able, with different regulations, is to kick the can down the road. And what they've been able to do is not price in the demand destruction that is taking place in the market. So before, like after 2008 and 2009, what happened was the banks had to mark the value of the commercial real estate that they had made a loan against to market to market. So let's say they had made a loan on a strip center that they valued at $2 million, but now because of all the commercial foreclosures that were taking place, the value of that strip center was now $1 million. The bank had to reduce the value of that, and then when they reduce the value of that, they have to keep the ratios in place. So they have to put up, they had to increase the value of their working capital. They had to put more money into the bank. This is exactly what Silicon Valley Bank had to do. Was they tried to go out and they tried to raise $2 billion by selling stock, and it didn't work. And when that didn't work, boom, it went down. So because of that demand, what I call demand destruction that took place from Charlie Vector and the change in the way people work, they have not priced that into the commercial banking system yet. They've kicked the can down the road. So when that starts to get priced in, and it has to get priced in at some point, commercial real estate it's going to be like China. It's already going through with Evergrande and some of their other big real estate companies, because of their collapsing demographics. Their whole demand structure has changed. You've seen, for example, there were reports 5-6 years ago, 60 Minutes and others did these reports on the ghost cities of China, where people had put all of their life savings into helping build these cities, because what the plan was, they were going to bring all the people from the rural areas into the cities where they're easier to control and it's easier to get them jobs and work. And that's how they were going to, but they built these ghost cities. I mean, cities would accommodate 2 or 3 million people and nobody lived there. Now China is going through and they're demolishing those cities. With the way the population is falling, for example, in Japan, Japan is losing, I don't know how many cities of 100,000 people per year. They have enough real estate that's now going empty every year that would satisfy the demands in California. And so wanted to ask the question, why is real estate so high, rent so high here in the United States? And the answer is it's supply and demand. There hasn't been enough housing built. People weren't investing in apartments and I think this was because a lot of people saw that commercial real estate was eventually going to go into the dumper, but it hasn't, and it's going to at some point. So what I want to do right now is I'm going to play a clip. This is just 2 or 3 minutes. It's from War Room the other day. Now I listen to War Room. I don't agree with everything that goes on War Room, but this is Dave Brat. Dave Brat is a former congressman. He is a business professor at Liberty University, pretty solid guy. And this is what he had to say on War Room the other day. So give me just a minute here to pull this up. Share screen. Okay, let's see if this works.
drinking warm water before bed.
Of course, now
fixes
it's
tooth and
because
gum
it's in
problems
Chrome. It's going to
overnight.
play a stupid ad.
People are healing decay.
Brad,
Okay, here we go.
Give us perspective on this Third World War. How far down is this analogous to 1938 and 1939?
Yes, there's no limit on the downside ahead if we get things wrong. And you just kind of triggered me on Frank Gaffney and the Committee on the Present Danger and all the work they've been doing, showing that your pension funds are invested in Chinese weapon systems aimed at us. Right. I mean, it's stunning. And Frank is utopian on his issue, like I probably am on economics. He thinks it's a matter of if we get the word out to the people, they will, shift. I'm not as optimistic. I think people kind of understand this, but it's just like the banking crisis and every crisis we have, right? No one wants to stop the Titanic right now. And the deck chairs are moving around.
But that's
where
that's where this audience is the vanguard. Remember, every time they go to a backyard barbecue, every time they go to the dinner party, every time they go to a PTA meeting, every time they're sitting in the stands watching the kids play sports, they're the ones that are most informed. People are sitting there go, where'd you hear that? I didn't know that.
That's right.
Boom. They're walking through how we're underwriting the debt crisis. They're giving us sophisticated analysis of how this happened. They understand that this is the Third World War. That the whole purpose of the show is that this is a vanguard. And you've never had a vanguard in this country, even in the Revolution and Civil War. You never had a vanguard that was fully informed with the best information out there that, quite frankly, is better than, I mean, look at J.D. Vance. He's a U.S. Senator. He goes and talks to the head guy, the senior people over there, and says, hey, I'm wondering here, are you giving an implicit guarantee to all deposits, or you just, and they say, well, we're working that through, right? This audience knew this on Friday, right? That's where, in this audience, that's why pick up your phone, get your email, and give, I'm not going to tell you what to say, just give you the information, but you better have your voice heard. Give it to them with both barrels, as we used to say. Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, and the folks can catch up. Xi Jinping gave his 20th Communist Party meeting notes, and they're turning inside. They're going full-on Marxist-Leninist. They got rid of all market reform. They're trying to form a consumer. That won't happen. And so our folks need to spread. China may be cracking.
I think
So that's a bit troubling with the way that that's going. So China could be cracking. So what I think Dave Brett's point was, there's no downside, no bottom to the downside on this. Things are very turbulent. So you have these threats about China, Russia, that sort of thing. So there was a CSIS report that I think I've referenced a couple times. Let's see if I can pull this up here. On war games. Here it is. The first battle of the next war. Assessing what will happen if China invades Taiwan. And the point of this is that it's not very positive for the United States. For example, and you can go to CSIS, Center for Strategic and International Studies. You can download their report. It's really pretty good. But their point is that the way things are going to happen is that the United States would blow through its artillery in a week. It's available missiles in a week. So understand that this is a very volatile situation. Now, China has some limitations too. Russia has some limitations. I just saw a report today, and I don't really know if it's true. Let's see if it was in this. Yeah, here's a report. Russian artillery shortage hurts offensive. I mean, Russia's having some shortages of artillery or artillery. So it's and I'm not going to get into the Russia-Ukraine war other than to say there was a shoot down of a Russia took down a U.S. drone, a pretty expensive drone over the Black Sea. Some question whether it was shot down or not. Why is it flying around up there? Well, it's international waters, and I think U.S. can fly around where it wants. And maybe people got out of control. I don't know. Remember, here's a Washington Post report on the drone. It's a MQ-9 Reaper. Here's a picture of it. I'm not sure about the exact nature of the cost of this Reaper. Okay, single Reaper drone costs roughly $30 million today. And so the question is going to be, so what's Biden going to do about it? Is he just going to say, hey, we don't like that you did that, Russia? Is he going to do something? Is he going to escalate? And remember, this is the Jerusalem Post from Friday, June 21st, 2019. So on June 20th, 2019, Iran shot down a U.S. drone, and it was a very expensive drone. That drone that Tehran shot down cost about $230 million. And we maybe put in some sanctions, but I don't even think President Trump did anything to attack Iran at this point. So everything is it's everywhere I look, everything is incredibly volatile. So you can, that's like I said, that's back in June of 2019 when Iran shot down a U.S. drone. Now Iran said, well, it came into our airspace, and I don't know if Russia's going to be claiming this about the drone shot down over the Black Sea. And it may be that they were just kind of playing chicken with it, and it ended up they had to take the thing down. But I would just say that everywhere I look, everything is pretty tense. In the Middle East, of course, we had this, this rapprochement between brokered by China between Iran and Saudi Arabia. That is playing out. The Wall Street Journal has a pretty good article about that. Here it is: Saudi prince tests non-aligned policy. And so the point is that, well, here, just read the first couple of paragraphs. Flush with cash from an oil boom, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is making foreign policy and business moves that test whether it is possible not to take sides in the rivalries between the U.S., China, Russia, and China. So, look, this is not good news for Israel. And the question is, how serious is Saudi Arabia about this diplomatic relations that are being restored with Iran? And then what's the impact? Now, most people that I see in Israel that I listen to have said they're concerned about this because what does this mean if Israel alone or Israel and the U.S. decides to attack Iran? I don't know if we have the weapons stock to do it. If you remember, the U.S. has gone to the weapons stores that they had in Israel to use those to send to Ukraine. So we don't have those. As I think I mentioned on Sunday, that Israel had flown some tankers and jets from Israel to the west to Saudi Arabia, and that mimics the distance from Israel to Tehran and Iran and back, going from Israel to Spain. And so the reason for that was to war game and practice for an attack on Iran. But listen, when somebody attacks Iran, everything is really going to break loose. So I'm not so sure that this agreement, Saudi Arabia making an agreement with Iran is not to force the U.S., and it's clear that it's to force the U.S. To do something with regard to to do something with regard to supplying more things to Saudi Arabia that it needs, weapons and stocks of uranium and that type of thing, so they can develop a nuclear program. But the flip side of this too is though that as this financial system unwinds, this is going to benefit countries with oil, and it's going to be Saudi Arabia, and they're already flush with cash. Last quarter, I think it was last quarter, Aramco made a profit of $166 billion. It was the largest quarterly profit. It was either yearly or quarterly. I think it was quarterly profit of any company in the history of finance. So we've seen the buildings and things that Mohammed bin Salman wants to do and what he wants to build. And I will also say that if Iraq can get its political act together, Iraq is going to become very, very wealthy because of the oil reserves that it has. So this is going to be a very volatile time. And I think that the way these alliances come together in the Middle East, so look, Iran wants Iraq and Saudi Arabia to be on its side, but I think that it's going to, I think, Iran and Saudi Arabia may end up aligning with Israel under the Abraham Accords. It's going to be interesting to watch. So I want to also bring this up. Now, this report came in the Jewish press. This is written by David Israel, who I know. If it's the one I know, I don't know too many David Israels in Israel. And he is, this is Jewish press. David was the former mayor of Shiloh. I've talked to him on the phone for, you may find this hard to believe, I talked to him for hours on the phone. Great guy. He and his son were attacked they were ambushed on their way back to Shiloh one day, and his son was very severely, they were both shot, and his son was very severely injured, and I think still has some issues with this at least a decade later after this happened. So David's very strong Zionist and that type of thing, great guy. But this is kind of interesting. So Netanyahu is sort of persona non grata among many people in Israel right now because of the judicial reform proposal. But he's been going to Europe, and he's been trying to broker deals in Europe. So here's the report. This is David Israel writing Jewish press yesterday. Netanyahu reaps stunning economic benefits from weekend visit to Europe. Here's what reporter Yossi Baum tweeted. You're going to fall off your chair. It looks like the prophet's vision of the end of times. But these are the facts. Israel's becoming a superpower. Our tiny country is becoming an extremely dominant and significant player vis-a-vis Europe in a way that completely changes the rules of the game in the Middle East, including vis-a-vis the Palestinian Authority. This is unbelievable. Netanyahu's visit to Italy this past weekend was intended to conclude a major deal for a $9 billion natural gas pipeline to be carried out by an American company with U.S. funding. Also, in Berlin later this week, Netanyahu is reportedly going to sign a $3 billion arms sale to Germany. The deal was announced in September, but was delayed because of the elections. Also, when Netanyahu hops to London next weekend, he's expected to seal another huge arms deal. So that's very interesting that does. Now, this is going to bring in the East Med pipeline. Let's see if I can blow that up a little bit. And I talked a lot about this. And remember, and this is kind of interesting, and there's a person you need to watch, and his name is Amos Hochstein. He works in the State Department, and in the Obama administration, he was the energy guru for the Middle East, oil, gas. He was the one when, under the Lapid government, they signed away, by many estimates, billions of dollars of potential revenue, public revenue, from the gas fields that were disputed with Lebanon. They signed those away, and that deal was brokered by Amos Hochstein. And I've played videos. There was a very good Turkish television report that I've played in my updates. And Hochstein was interviewed. And what what he had said, they came out, the U.S. came out roughly a year ago and said, nope, we're not going to back the building of this pipeline all the way across the Eastern Mediterranean to deliver gas to Europe. Now, Israel has a lot of gas. But it's like 1/20th the amount of gas that Russia has. Russia has way more gas. As they describe Russia as a country or a gas station with a country attached to it. But this pipeline will be very expensive, $9 billion, $10 billion. It could take 5 years to build. So the gas that Israel has is not getting through that pipeline to Europe anytime soon. But the U.S. came in and said, well, we don't really want long-term energy deals like this, deals to deliver energy because of the green agenda. And so Hochstein shut that down. Now Netanyahu is kind of going around behind him and going to Europe directly and saying, hey, let's get this thing financed. You need gas. We have gas. And remember, though, that Hochstein used to work for a company that does liquefied natural gas. I can't remember the name of it. They're located down in Texas. And he was like their public relations guy between the time that the Obama administration, second term of Obama ended in Obama's third term. Obama's third term started in what I call the Biden administration. So that's what's going on there. So watch Hochstein, because the U.S. companies that do liquefied natural gas is the U.S. companies that do liquefied natural gas are making a killing in Europe right now because, Nord Stream was damaged, taken offline. Nord Stream 2 never started, but it was also damaged in attack back in, I think it was September. By the way, there's a story floating around now that the Nord Stream pipeline was taken up by a special ops team from Ukraine. And I don't know if that, I'm not sure if it's true. That's what it's claimed. And it may be a story that's coming up so the U.S. has a way to back off getting further involved in Ukraine. I don't know. That's one of these things we have to see. By the way, there was I think Erdogan came out. He's standing for election in about 2 months. The parties opposing him are unified. And Erdogan I think he's just a master politician and pretty vicious in the way he goes about it. And this week he came out, and I think he apologized for the response on the earthquake, which I think the death toll is now above 60,000, and I think there are still 10,000 people missing. And I could have the numbers wrong. I just read that very quickly. But so watch the East Med thing. I think it's important. But the thing that I found kind of interesting was the language that was used in the beginning part of this article, where the reporter who initially reported on it, Yossi Baum, who writes for here's his tweet. And you can go and get that. And if you have Twitter, it's great because it'll translate everything pretty quickly for you. So that's something to watch. Also, another report from David Israel was this report, and it kind of relates to this protest that's going on in Israel over the judicial reform. There's a lot of question, like who's funding this thing? And I think there's some evidence that the Obama administration is funding it. There have been tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people protesting in the streets. Everybody is melting down. So the daughter of Sheldon Adelson, who I think is now the editor of Israel Hayom, published an op-ed. This is Israel Hayom. You can find the digital version online. They also have an English translation. And she published an op-ed talking about judicial reform. She's opposed to it. and the Adelsons have been big funders of Netanyahu's campaign. But what's interesting, what David Israel brings up is this report. Here it is. Legal counsel forbids government videos explaining judicial reform. Now, this is what happens. So you need to understand that everywhere we look, everybody is trying to control the narrative. But so this is what David writes, and this is kind of an op-ed. But he says this: one of the complaints we on the right voice against leaders of the judicial reform and their staff is the absence of good information on the initiative to counteract the insistent flood of lies and fear-mongering being promulgated by the 3 left-leaning TV channels and most mainstream newspapers. I'm talking to you, Haaretz. And it's true. There's like one narrative. And so there were some people, so listen to this. On Tuesday night, Hasbara Minister Galit Distel Atbaryan of Likud was asked that very question by the only true and fair balanced, which is code for right-leaning host on KAN 11 News. Now, the center and center-left say that Channel 11 News in Israel is a complete propaganda channel. Hassan is a very recent import from Channel 13, which decided to dump her despite her unmatched ratings. It appears Channel 13 is aiming strictly at the left, much like Haaretz. Both channels have dropped all pretense, cleansing their last remaining non-leftist talent. And we see this happening in the United States. And it turns out the reason for the government's roaring silence on the reform is not this minister's laziness, but the prime minister's office legal counselor, Shlomit Barnea Fargo, and I'm fracturing the name, so you can go to Jewish Press and read this article, who last month forbade the Hasbara ministry from conducting a campaign on, quote, creating discourse and bringing hearts together, quote, unquote, which would have included a discussion of the judicial reform that involves the entire spectrum of views. Barnea Fargo, and this is one of the problems, this is why some are seeking reform. So Barnea Fargo is a legal counselor in Netanyahu's prime minister office. But listen to this. Barnea Fargo, who was not appointed by the prime minister, but was foisted on him by the judicial system, pinned her response on a clause that prohibits election propaganda funded by a government office. Fargo Barnea added, we would suggest considering an awareness campaign on the topic of unity without going into the details of the reform. And I've seen this. I've asked people in Israel, can you get me, and maybe they're busy, they didn't have time to respond to me, but my question has been, can you get me the judicial reform legislation? I know it's in Hebrew. I'll translate it. I'll figure out how to translate it so I can see what's going on. And people on the right, I've heard them say that, for example, in prior governments, this question about judicial reform has been going on in Israeli politics for 30 years. And the people like, you can find videos of Lapid saying we need judicial reform. There was, in this particular case, somebody from the Netanyahu coalition went to a minister, a member of Knesset, an MK from the Israel Bethany party of Avigdor Lieberman. It's a largely Russian Jewish immigrants that's in that party. And he hates Netanyahu. Even though he was in Netanyahu's government for a while, he will have nothing to do with Netanyahu. He'll just not allow anybody to get a majority if it involves Netanyahu in any way. And so somebody from Netanyahu coalition goes to somebody from Avigdor Lieberman's party, member Knesset, and says, hey, you proposed a while back judicial reform, and the judicial reform that you proposed was even more comprehensive than what we've proposed. So what we can do is, can we get your legislation and we'll just reintroduce it? And of course they act like this is not happening or anything like that. So, so this is what's happening. So like when somebody wants to educate the public from a minister's office, they're not allowed to do it because it'll be considered campaigning. And maybe it's not proper. I don't know the exact ins and outs of Israeli law, but they've essentially trying to shut down everything that Netanyahu wants to do to try to I think the Attorney General of Israel came out and said he could not participate in the arguments of the campaigning over judicial reform. So he's effectively shut out of the government that he supposedly leads. So the whole thing is a mess, and I think it just shows that happening is that this is just sort of proves the point that they need this. So this is what David Israel says. Remember what I said about Bernina Fargos? That's the legal counselor in Netanyahu's office. Aggressive sense of humor. She wrote back that the Hasbara ministry may only publish content referring to its own activity and is closely and clearly related to the ministry's work. In other words, the Hasbara ministry is only allowed to do Hasbara about the Hasbara ministry. So this is part of the craziness that I think is going on in Israel's government. Thomas Friedman, he's been writing about this. He really hates Netanyahu. This is what he wrote back on February 28th in an opinion piece in the New York Times. Netanyahu is shattering Israeli society. And then today in the New York Times, he has one, Putin and Netanyahu show why bad things happen to bad leaders. And so he doesn't like Putin, he doesn't like Netanyahu, and he puts them on the same page. And they're the ones who are causing all the problems. So that's sort of a nutshell. I'm going to talk more about this on Sunday. Everything is so complicated and interrelated at this point. So let me just go into one more thing. This is OpenAI's website. And today they released GPT-4. Now, it's not ChatGPT-4. They have ChatGPT-3, but they have GPT-4, which is an open language artificial intelligence system. Some of the early results of this system that they're being used, for example, they're giving it the LSAT, the law school admission test, and it's getting in the 90s percentile correct answers. They are giving it other admission tests like business school admission test, and it's getting in the 90, 95, 98 percentile results. This stuff is changing everything. And I believe I have it correct. I wasn't able to find the tweet just before this because I was having all those monitor problems. But with the performance that's happening, everybody's saying, and Elon Musk has been saying this for a long time, eventually this artificial intelligence is going to exceed human intelligence. And what do we do then? And now I'm hearing that it's bringing effect. I don't know if I should show this or not. Here's one of his tweets about this just today. Oh, yeah. So they bring out this OpenAI stuff. This is under the control of Microsoft. And what did Microsoft do? They fired their ethics team that was dealing and trying to control the ethics around this OpenAI and GPT and ChatGPT stuff. And so we have this increase in this artificial intelligence capabilities, and this is happening very soon. Remember, ChatGPT-3 kind of upended everything, and it came out like around December the 1st. So we're not even really a little 3.5 months into ChatGPT-3. Now they come out with GPT-4, and Microsoft, who's pushing it out there on everything, fires their ethics team. They cut back their ethics team. this is a bit concerning. But I think Musk's tweet here that I see, and I don't want you to think that this is, but listen, do you see the Green Reaper of this one aspect of what's happening? And it got home video, it got cable TV, it got the internet, and now it's knocking on the door of generative AI. And that's a big concern about what's going to happen. Now, in the, and I know a lot of people don't like the New York Times, but sometimes you got to know what the enemy is doing. And sometimes they have long been expressing concerns about the privacy things that are happening, the invasion of privacy and people's space that's happening with these tech tools. So Ezra Klein, he's a man of the left. He writes this editorial. I don't think it was in the paper, but it's on the website. And what did he say? This is what he wrote. This was published on Monday. This changes everything. And he's talking about OpenAI and what it means. And look at some of this. So he says, the chief executive of Google said, AI is probably the most important thing humanity has ever worked on. I think of it as something more profound than electricity or fire. And this is the people that are pushing this. This is the way they think. Remember the video I played of the guy, Ludowski, who said that it almost seems like when they're doing this AI stuff, they're summoning demons. And so what did we do? We put a demon summoning device in everybody's living room, like Alexa and that type of thing. And they understand that there's something very big going on with these ideas. I saw an interview with Ray Kurzweil, who said that the singularity now, remember there was a very famous Time cover back in 2011 or 12, 2045, the year man becomes immortal, because this is where they're thinking. This is what they want to achieve. And this is what they've been talking about. Now they're saying it's going to happen, they think, in 7 years. So it's a religion. But look, so AI is the most profound thing. And this is what Ezra Klein says. And I think this is pretty profound and honest, and what he says is concerning. Try to live for a few minutes in the possibility that he's right. There is no more profound human bias than the expectation that tomorrow will be like today. It is a powerful heuristic tool because it is almost always correct. Tomorrow probably will be like today. Next year probably will be like this year, but cast your gaze 10 or 20 years out. Typically that has been possible in human history. I don't think it is now. And he talks about, he says, I am describing not the soul of intelligence, but the texture of a world populated by ChatGPT-like programs that feel to us as though they were intelligent and that shape or govern much of our lives. Such systems are to a large extent already here. But what's coming will make them look like toys. What is hardest to appreciate in AI is the improvement curve. The broader intellectual world seems to go wildly overestimate how long it will take AI systems to go from large impact on the world to unrecognizably transform world. Paul Christiano, a key member of OpenAI, who left to found the Alignment Research Center, wrote last year. This is more likely to be years than decades, and there's a real chance that it's months. Perhaps the developers will hit a wall they do not expect, but what if they don't? And he goes on down here to where he says, let me find the exact phrase. There we go. We typically search for science fiction stories when thinking about AI. I've come to believe the apt metaphors lurk in fantasy novels and occult text. As my colleague Ross Douthat wrote, this is an act of summoning. The coders casting these spells will have no idea what will stumble through the portal. What is oddest in my conversations with them is that they speak of this freely. These are not knaves who believe their call can only be heard by angels. They believe they might summon demons. They are calling anyway. I often ask them the same question. If you think calamity is so possible, why do this at all? Different people have different things to say, but after a few pushes, I find they often answer from something that sounds like AI's perspective. Many, not all, but enough that I feel comfortable in this characterization, feel that they have a responsibility to usher this new form of intelligence into the world. A tempting thought at this moment might be, these people are nuts. That has often been my response. Perhaps being too close to this technology leads to a loss of perspective. This was true among cryptocurrency enthusiasts in recent years. He goes on, is AI just taking crypto's place as a money suck for investors and a time suck for idealists and a magnet for hype men and hotbed for scams? I don't think so. With AI, to imagine the future, you need only to look closely at the present. So this is very concerning. So look, I'm going to talk more about this on Sunday. I don't know if I see any questions here. I don't see any questions offhand. So look, don't forget. So Last Days Bible Conference in Canada in early May, Montreal in Scotland in June. I'll also be in England the weekend before that. I think it's the weekend, June 10th, 9th, June 10th and 11th. I'll be in England, and we hope to get out to California sometime in the near future as well. So, contact me, and if somebody wants to get together and have me do something someplace, I'm more than willing to consider that. This is a very strange world. So we have economic collapse, we have threats of war, we have, I think, looming war, we have looming economic collapse, and then we have this artificial intelligence on top of it. It's just like everything keeps piling on the other. But look, the Lord's in control. We know that this will eventually wrap up with the return of Jesus. But, in the meantime, we got to get out there and share the gospel with people, because this is a crazy time. And also, I just would ask, I do Stand Up for the Truth with David Fiorazo quite often. His wife is struggling quite a bit. Pray for them and wisdom. You can follow Rosanna's journey on Facebook. Pray for David, the strength and wisdom that he needs to help guide Rosanna through this. Pray for her recovery. Pray for wisdom. They're seeing doctors and everything. It's a very difficult time for them. And what's the old saying? God never gives you more than you can bear, but sometimes it's like, Lord, please, enough is enough. So pray for David, pray for Rosanna, and I will see you Sunday morning. If you want to watch live, 8 a.m. Eastern time, Sunday morning. God bless, and thank you.